Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Presented by Pipe Wrench, and by Junk Be Gone, and by the Garza Law Firm.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday morning and welcome into the Sports Source here in the Junk Be Gone studios. We are thrilled to have you with us. We have a packed house to discuss what was an absolute nightmare scenario out of Columbia last night. Can't remember a game that was that out of left field. And you saw it all day long. It was like Tennessee didn't heed the warning that today is the day when all the teams that have no reason to play well. But Tennessee just got lapped by Carolina last night. You lose Hendon Hooker. We got a lot of stuff to delve into, and we got 10 people here to do it. I will say that I had someone on Twitter ask me, you guys had champagne out there when you beat Florida. Well, you have Jack Daniels on the set today. That or cyanide capsules. But here's the thing to remember. If you tune in here thinking you're going to see a funeral, we don't do funerals on this show. It's a wake. We're going to have some fun with it. That's the way it goes. We're going to break down a game and look to the future. Let's start. First segment of our show, brought to you by our friends at Paper Be Gone. Tax season fast approaching. Once another year has flipped on the calendar, you can discard those records that are 7 years old. Do it safely, do it securely. Do it by calling Paper Be Gone. They can destroy and remove everything from paper documents to x-rays to computer hard drives. PaperBeGone.com. All right, let's dive in. Let's welcome in the first wave of panelists. And as I said, we have 10 people on the show today. So first group, Jimmy Himes from 99.1 The Sports Animal. Jimmy, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Former D1 college football player, longtime Vol fan, former D1 Power 5 defensive coordinator, Justin Hamilton. Justin, thanks for being here.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for working with me this week on a segment that won't even appear today. That was great. Mike Stoll, had to rewrite the show last night. Mike Stoll, former Vol, good to have you back here.
Great to be here.
And you got some good news. Yes, you got twins on the way as a
not me.
Gramps.
Yes, Gramps.
Gramps. I know you wanted
team both.
Yeah.
Team both. They're boy and a girl. So
congratulations, man.
one we can teach to do softball, and the other one we can teach to do fish hooks and poke people in the
There you go. The offensive line training. Congrats to your daughter. And right over there, Bob Hodge, who's been with us for many years on this show, longtime sports writer in this town, longtime media personality. Bob, thanks.
Just a long time.
Long time. Long time. And it's been a long time since we saw a beatdown like that. Let me go ahead and just give you the gist on this thing, if we can put up the graphic. Vols lose a shot at the playoffs and possible national championship. That has to rank as one of UT's all-time worst losses simply because of the consequences, or what was the cost, you know. Their star quarterback, Hendon Hooker, appeared to suffer a serious knee injury, you would imagine. Tennessee hasn't said anything yet, but that's the guess. His status is therefore in doubt, and the Heisman Trophy is most likely lost. The defense had its worst performance of the year, though everyone had known since the summer that the secondary and pass rush were going to be questionable. There was nothing close to that performance that we've seen all year long, even from much better teams that they've gone against. So, of those things, and you might have something else, that's a pretty good list. I'm going to start with Mike Stoll. What's the lead story?
So think back to Coach Majors, and all these things are relevant. So I would think of this as a book, and I would title the book, as Coach Majors would always say, if and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. A lot of ifs, a lot of buts, a lot of questions there that just all from the national title, possibility playoffs falling down, Hooker getting hurt, Tennessee maybe finally getting a Heisman Trophy winner. Yeah. So many different things. It's painful to see, but it's a book, and there's a lot of nasty chapters in that book.
I'm going to go more with the TV show episode because tonight's the last episode of The Walking Dead, and that's the way your defense played yesterday. And it struck me that Tennessee's defense, the bad part of it's been hidden. And you see the occasional good game. LSU, Kentucky.
Pitt played okay.
Pitt, played pretty good against Pitt. But this defense was really exposed last night. We're going to get into a lot of the reasons how come. But it just made me think that, okay, this is what happens. You play with fire when you've got a defense that can't perform at the highest level. Well, the highest level for this defense, better than mediocre, but that was its highest level. So when you're bad, you're really bad.
Lead story?
To me, it was a game of opposites. Tennessee's got the Heisman Trophy candidate, but Spencer Rattler played like the Heisman Trophy winner. Tennessee's got the high-powered offense. South Carolina scores 9 touchdowns. Tennessee's got the fast-starting offense. South Carolina led 21-7 in the first quarter. Tennessee's got a lot to play for, and it looked like South Carolina wanted it more. I just thought it was kind of a game of opposites of what I thought the way it would play out.
That's a good one. Justin, what were your thoughts? What's the biggest story?
There's victory and there's misery. That's the only two emotions that you get throughout the course of a season.
Anger mixes in with misery.
Anger is a
Yeah.
co-partner
Yeah.
with misery.
Yeah.
But that's the two things that you get. And when you win, it feels great. When you're on the other end of it, on the South Carolina's end of it, it's the greatest feeling in the world. You know you have to flush it quickly, move on to the next game. But the opposite side of that is it's just a miserable feeling for all the reasons that you guys have mentioned that we'll get into. But it's a tough day today as a coach and as a player walking around that building.
One thing we didn't see last year that we commented on this show, and we hadn't seen it until last night, and Bob reminded me of, that was the first clunker of the Josh Heupel era. Now, we've seen them lose, but it wasn't where you're clearly the better team, and you just took it on the chin. Last night, you were clearly the better team. There was nothing. And we'll look at South Carolina's stats versus SEC teams. We'll look what they did last week versus this week. There was nothing to suggest that was coming. Last week on the show, we put up a list. I went through, here are the things that trouble Tennessee. Can South Carolina do any of them? No, they can't do anything. Is there any reason to panic? No, we all laughed and then ended by saying, and that's why it's going to live on YouTube when they lose. There you go. And they did. I just can't remember. We always talk about any given Saturday and all this other stuff, and you've talked about you never see the same team twice, and you're dealing with inconsistent 18-year-olds. There you go. You saw it last night. You saw it across the country, but you really saw it last night.
That's what I was going to say. To win a championship, to be in November championship level football, you have to win your clunker. And we watched 3 teams do that yesterday. I don't know that TCU's was a clunker, but Michigan and Ohio State won their clunkers. And TCU won the close game at the end, and Tennessee didn't win their clunker.
Go ahead, Bob.
I was just going to say, now you got to worry about the carryover effect from this because they bounced back well after Georgia. They came back from Georgia. Hey, look at this. They're still playing well. The offense still looks like it did before the Georgia game. This one has a lot different feel to it. This isn't Georgia. This isn't the best team in the country. This isn't, my gosh, how can you play with all those athletes they have? So the question to me now becomes, do you shake this one off the way you seemingly shaked the Georgia game off?
And you're going to have to do it on the road, not at home. Yeah. And you're probably going to have to do it without your leader, Hendon Hooker. And we don't know if you're going to have Jeremy Banks back. We'll talk about that situation later. There's a lot of, you're right, it doesn't feel the same.
I don't look at it as on the road so much as you're going to a guest house. I mean,
I'll show you some stats. This team doesn't do well outside in a guest house.
That's true.
I mean, that's the issue. Mike, any follow up on this?
Yeah, I think the overall effect is pretty important. Tennessee, I always say, you remember what you do in November. You're 1-2 in November on a team that had so much potential. And you're right. How do they play against Vanderbilt? How do you play? What do you roll into a bowl game? Who plays in the bowl game? Because I'm getting ready for the league. You see guys doing that all the time. So a really bright spot at the end of October now is kind of getting a little bit tarnished, but they're still 9-2.
Yeah.
John, there's a crazy thing, too, about it. So Florida, the week before, just destroyed South Carolina. South Carolina was awful. They come back and they play their best game of the year. Baylor gets destroyed by Kansas State, almost beats TCU. Illinois got whipped the week before, almost beats Michigan. Maryland was awful the week before, and they almost beat Ohio State. You don't know what you're going to get from week to week college football.
Yeah, and that's, again, we try and, you talk about picking game. When you do a show like this, and you know this, you do a show like this, you're basing it on the overview. Mm-hmm. You're basing it on trends. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's all you can do. But the reality is any given Saturday. Any given Saturday, because you can't sit there and say, well, the defense has been bad all year, so I knew this was. Defense hasn't been anywhere near that bad this year.
No.
Nowhere near that bad. Yeah. And South Carolina's offense, if you wanted to lose because of defense, all right, Alabama. Okay, that's the one. Georgia, LSU, Florida, South Carolina, that's one of the worst offenses in the league. And yet Spencer Rattler, Give him credit. He played his brains out last
He'd never
night.
been close to that good at
I
South
think
Carolina.
South Carolina's
He had one
off-
200-yard game all year at South Carolina until last night.
You got to go back to not last year when he got it benched, the year before when he was the Heisman candidate at
At
Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I think South Carolina's offensive line is rated either the last or next to last in the SEC as far as just the what they do. I mean, next to last in the SEC.
And yet, short yardage play after short yardage play, they took it
And
to
they
you,
couldn't,
and they
they
protected
couldn't do a lot of
Spencer.
things. with
Bird
the
a third
front
and
four.
20.
Yeah.
And Spencer Rattler had all day.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, we got a lot to cover. So when we come back, what did we learn last night, and what's up with Shane Beamer and Josh Heupel? Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler seem to think something's up. We'll discuss that. We'll discuss Kamal Haddon and the chirping Vols and much more. We got numbers to show you. Coming back on the Sports Source.